When Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont, a Royal Guard with 20 years of service, stepped into his son Oliver's classroom at Westfield Academy, few could have predicted the intellectual showdown that would unfold. Professor Malcolm Lawrence, a tall, lean academic with wire-rimmed glasses and a tweed jacket, saw Eldon's scarlet tunic and polished brass buttons as a perfect target, an outdated symbol of what he called mindless soldiers, propping up Britain's fading imperial glory. With a smirk, Lawrence challenged Eldon to a cognitive test, expecting to expose him as a mere ceremonial figure, a human statue incapable of the critical thinking prized in academia. The professor's smug certainty filled the room as he handed out the assessment, designed to measure problem-solving, pattern recognition, and analytical skills he assumed a soldier couldn't possibly possess. But Eldon, with the same precision he applied to pressing his uniform each morning, dismantled those assumptions one answer at a time. As he worked through the problems, his white-gloved hands moved steadily across the page, his solutions revealing not just competence, but brilliance. The final blow came with a lateral thinking puzzle that had stumped doctoral candidates. Eldon solved it using a strategic approach honed in combat zones like Afghanistan, where he'd commanded tactical intelligence units. The classroom fell silent, 30 pairs of eyes wide with astonishment as Lawrence's confidence crumbled, his artificial smile replaced by confusion. Eldon's revelation of 2 master's degrees, one in military history from King's College London, another in international security from St. Andrews, sealed the moment, proving his intellect rivaled any scholar's. What began as an attempt to humiliate a toy soldier ended with a stunning reversal, showing that true intelligence defies stereotypes, thriving in unexpected places like a guard's disciplined mind rather than just a professor's lecture hall. The clash between Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont and Professor Malcolm Lawrence at Westfield Academy wasn't just a personal showdown. It was a battle of ideals, pitting tradition against modernity in a way that left the classroom buzzing. Eldon, a Royal Guard with 20 years of service, embodied tradition down to the last polished button on his scarlet tunic. Every morning, he pressed his uniform with military precision, a ritual ingrained from decades of standing guard at Buckingham Palace and serving in combat zones like Afghanistan and Iraq. To him, this wasn't mere pageantry. It was a living connection to history, a reminder of values like duty, honor, and resilience that he believed transcended time. He told his son Oliver, slumped over breakfast and skeptical of his father's old-school ways, that traditions must be taught and understood, or they and the principles they carry would fade away. Enter Professor Lawrence, a wiry academic whose tweed jacket and sharp tongue screamed modernity. He saw Eldon's role as a relic, a theatrical puppet, in an outdated pageant of fading imperialism, as he put it with a dismissive wave. To Lawrence, the guards were taxpayer-funded statues, preserving a Britain that could no longer wield real power in a post-colonial world. He scoffed at the idea of intellectual value in standing motionless, challenging Eldon to prove otherwise in front of a room full of wide-eyed students. Yet, as Eldon calmly accepted the challenge and aced a cognitive test with strategic flair, the debate shifted. He didn't just defend his role, he redefined it, arguing that the guard's ceremonial duties symbolized continuity in a world of rapid change, values like mental control and commitment that echoed the best of academic inquiry. Lawrence, caught off guard, clung to his view that tradition was a refuge for institutions unable to justify themselves. But his words rang hollow as Eldon's whiteboard diagram turned abstract problems into battlefield strategies. For Oliver, watching his father's quiet authority silence the professor's sarcasm, the moment bridged their generational divide. What emerged wasn't a victory of one side over the other, but a revelation. tradition, and modernity aren't enemies. Eldon showed they could coexist, each enriching the other, leaving the class and Lawrence rethinking the worth of a uniform they'd once dismissed. In the tense air of Westfield Academy's classroom, Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont turned a smug challenge from Professor Malcolm Lawrence into a profound lesson about the complementary nature of education and service, shattering the notion that they stand in opposition. Eldon, a royal guard with a chiseled 20-year career, arrived in his scarlet tunic not just to drop off his son Oliver, but to confront a worldview that dismissed his profession as mindless. Lawrence, perched behind his desk in a tweed jacket, saw the military as a dumping ground for those too dim for university, a belief he wielded like a weapon when he taunted Eldon with a cognitive test. He framed it as a duel, academia's critical thinkers versus the military's obedient drones. But Eldon, with the quiet authority of a man who'd led troops in Afghanistan, flipped the script. As he tackled the test's puzzles, his white-gloved hands moving with the same precision he used to polish his uniform, he revealed a mind sharpened by both battlefield strategy and scholarly pursuit. His revelation of 2 master's degrees, one in military history from King's College London and another in international security from St. Andrews, stunned the room, but it was his reasoning that drove the point home. Education and service aren't opposing forces, Oliver, he'd told his son earlier, a lesson he now lived out loud. He explained to the class that military service taught discipline, strategic thinking, and leadership, skills that dovetailed with academic knowledge, not contradicted it. The finest officers he'd served with, he noted, were also the most educated, their degrees amplifying their command. Lawrence's attempt to paint service as intellectually barren crumbled as Eldon's whiteboard diagram turned a lateral thinking problem into a tactical scenario, blending combat-honed adaptability with scholarly insight. For Oliver, who'd shrunk in his seat under his teacher's barbs, this was a turning point. His father wasn't just a guard, but a scholar-warrior. Even Lawrence, scrambling to salvage his argument, couldn't deny the synergy Eldon embodied. The lesson wasn't about one triumphing over the other, it was about their harmony. Education fueled Eldon's service, and service enriched his education, proving that true strength lies in their union. A truth that left the classroom, and perhaps Lawrence himself, rethinking the divide they'd assumed was absolute. Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont's encounter with Professor Malcolm Lawrence at Westfield Academy was more than a test of intellect. It was a masterclass in overcoming prejudice with dignity, a quiet triumph that turned disdain into reluctant awe. From the moment Eldon stepped into the classroom, his scarlet tunic gleaming with 20 years of service, Lawrence saw an opportunity to mock. The professor, cloaked in tweed and academic arrogance, pegged Eldon as a toy soldier, a relic of imperial pomp unfit for the modern world. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he challenged Eldon to a cognitive test, expecting to humiliate a man he assumed lacked the brain power to match his own. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what intellectual rigors come with standing still?" Lawrence sneered, his words a dagger aimed at Eldon's profession, and by extension, his worth. Yet Eldon, with the calm of a man who'd faced worse than classroom taunts in Afghanistan, didn't flinch. His dignity, forged through years of polishing brass buttons to a mirror shine and commanding troops under fire, held firm. As he accepted the test, his white-gloved hands moved with deliberate grace, solving each problem with a precision that silenced the room. Lawrence circled, waiting for a stumble, but Eldon's responses, especially his tactical take on a lateral thinking puzzle, flipped the script. He didn't lash out or boast. He let his work speak, backed by 2 master's degrees and combat experience that dwarfed the professor's smug assumptions. The students, initially braced for a crash, watched in stunned silence as Lawrence's razor-thin smile faded, his jabs landing on empty air. For Oliver, Eldon's son, who'd shrunk under his teachers earlier, barbs about mindless automatons, this was a revelation. His father's uniform wasn't a mark of shame, but a badge of honor. Eldon's final words to the class, about tradition's deeper value, weren't a rebuttal, but a bridge, delivered with a steady gaze that met Lawrence's without malice. He walked out, cap adjusted to regulation perfection, leaving behind a lesson etched on the whiteboard and in the room's shifted air. Prejudice falters when met with quiet competence. Lawrence's attempt to judge Eldon by his uniform failed. Proving dignity can dismantle bias without raising a voice. Just a pencil and a purpose. In the heart of the confrontation at Westfield Academy, the story of Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont and his son Oliver unfolded as a poignant tale of a father-son bond strengthened through an unexpected trial. Oliver, a 13-year-old wrestling with the loss of his mother 3 years prior, had drifted into a quiet rebellion against his father's world of discipline and tradition. That morning, as Eldon pressed his scarlet tunic with military precision, each crease sharp enough to cut, each button gleaming like a star, Oliver slumped downstairs in pajamas, groaning about school. "I don't feel well, Dad," he mumbled, his weak cough a flimsy excuse to avoid a history class where Professor Lawrence mocked the Royal Guards as theatrical puppets. To Oliver, his father's rigid life seemed outdated, a source of embarrassment, amplified by Lawrence's taunts about mindless automatons aimed at him in class. But when Eldon, undeterred, drove Oliver to school and walked him to the classroom in full uniform, the stakes rose. Lawrence seized the moment, challenging Eldon to a cognitive test to prove his supposed intellectual inferiority. An attack that stung Oliver too, his shoulders hunching as 30 classmates stared. Yet, as Eldon faced the professor's sarcasm with unshakable calm, something shifted. With white-gloved hands, he tackled the test, his pencil tracing solutions that turned abstract puzzles into battlefield strategies, revealing not just skill, but a mind honed by 2 master's degrees and combat tours in Afghanistan. Oliver, once mortified, sat up straighter, his eyes tracing his father's steady movements. When Eldon's final answer stumped Lawrence and earned nods from students, Oliver's face lit with a pride he hadn't felt in years. The professor's barbs, once a wedge between them, became the anvil on which their bond was reforged. Eldon's parting words, "Will you be all right for the day?" met Oliver's firm, "Yes, sir," a response heavy with newfound respect. As Eldon left, cap adjusted to perfection, Oliver saw not just a guard, but a father who'd stood tall against prejudice, bridging their generational gap. Lawrence's later curiosity about Eldon's work, has he published anything, only cemented Oliver's shift, his confidence blooming as he realized his father's worth transcended the uniform. What began as a morning of dread ended with a son's admiration restored, their connection deepened by a father's quiet victory in a classroom far from Buckingham Palace. Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont's presence at Westfield Academy revealed a profound truth. Quiet strength, rooted in discipline and focus, can outshine even the loudest displays of arrogance, as seen in his clash with Professor Malcolm Lawrence. From the moment Eldon began his day, pressing his scarlet tunic with a ruler-straight crease and polishing each brass button until it gleamed, his power was evident not in noise, but in precision. This wasn't just routine. It was a testament to 20 years of service, from commanding troops in Afghanistan to standing guard at Buckingham Palace, where every detail reflected a deeper resolve. When he entered Oliver's classroom, cap in hand, Lawrence saw only a toy soldier ripe for ridicule, launching a barrage of sarcasm about the intellectual rigors of standing still. Yet Eldon's response wasn't a shout or a sneer. It was a stillness that carried weight. Accepting the professor's cognitive test, he sat, white-gloved hands moving with the same methodical care he'd shown at dawn, turning abstract problems into strategic solutions drawn from combat experience. His voice, when he spoke, was steady, not raised, as he explained how discipline wasn't mindless obedience, but the physical manifestation of mental control, a quality he'd honed under fire and now wielded on paper. The classroom, braced for his failure, watched in hushed awe as Lawrence's taunts faltered. Eldon's pencil outpaced the professor's bluster. Even his final act, sketching a battlefield diagram to crack a lateral thinking puzzle, was understated yet commanding, his quiet authority shifting the room's dynamic. For Oliver, who'd shrunk under his teacher's jabs, this was a revelation. His father's stillness wasn't weakness, but a strength that silenced doubters without fanfare. Lawrence, scrambling to recover, couldn't dent Eldon's composure, his own theatrics paling beside the guard's calm mastery. As Eldon left, Cap adjusted with practiced ease. He embodied a power that didn't need volume. His uniform, his answers, his very bearing spoke louder than words. To tourists later that day, he'd be a motionless figure. To those in the classroom, he was a force, proving that true strength lies in the quiet focus of a disciplined mind, capable of standing firm against prejudice or pressure. The whiteboard diagram he left behind wasn't just a solution. It was a monument to the potency of restraint, a lesson etched in silence. At Westfield Academy, Lieutenant Eldon Marchmont's clash with Professor Malcolm Lawrence became more than a test of wits. It crystallized a lesson in understanding over judgment, challenging the room to see beyond surface assumptions. Lawrence, with his tweed jacket and biting sarcasm, judged Eldon's scarlet tunic as a symbol of obsolete tradition, a toy soldier unworthy of intellectual respect. He thrust a cognitive test at Eldon, expecting to expose a lack of depth, his voice sharp with the certainty that military service and academic rigor couldn't coexist. Yet Eldon, a Royal Guard with 20 years of service and 2 master's degrees, met this prejudice with a calm that demanded reconsideration. As he solved each problem, his white-gloved hands steady, his solutions blending battlefield strategy with scholarly insight, he didn't just prove his intelligence, he invited a deeper look. "You teach students to question everything," he told Lawrence, his tone firm yet unaggressive. "But questioning isn't the end goal. Understanding is." His words hung in the air, a quiet rebuke to the professor's snap judgments, urging the class to see that knowledge and service aren't rivals, but allies. Lawrence's worldview, built on dismissing what he didn't grasp, cracked as students nodded at Eldon's whiteboard diagram, a tactical take on a logic puzzle that bridged their lesson to real-world stakes. For Oliver, watching his father transform mockery into meaning, it was a shift from shame to pride. Even Lawrence, though reluctant, paused, his final musing about inviting Eldon back, hinting at a grudging rethink. As Eldon exited, cap in place, he left behind a truth. True understanding recognizes the value in all forms of contribution, whether in a guard's disciplined stance or a scholar's probing questions. The lesson wasn't about who won, but about moving past judgment to see the wisdom in every uniform, a call to connect rather than divide. The story of Eldon Marchmont and Professor Lawrence offers timeless lessons for us seniors. Intelligence isn't defined by titles or appearances, and true strength lies in quiet dignity. Eldon, a Royal Guard, faced prejudice from a smug academic, but turned it into a victory through skill and grace, proving that wisdom can thrive in unexpected places, whether in a uniform or a lifetime of hard-earned experience. For those of us over 50 who've weathered decades of judgment about our careers, looks, or old-school ways, this is a reminder not to let others' narrow views dim our shine. His bond with his son Oliver teaches us that standing firm in our values can inspire the next generation, even when they drift. Most powerfully, Eldon's call to understand rather than judge urges us to look beyond first impressions, at the neighbor who seems gruff but has a heart of gold, or the kid who seems lost but just needs a steady hand. As we navigate retirement, family, or community roles, let's carry this. Our worth isn't in what others see, but in the resilience we show and the understanding we share. That's a legacy worth living.